بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Quranic Arabic webinars. This lesson is about madda, which is the elongation of sounds. Objectives: to learn the rules of elongation of long vowel sounds, to understand when the madda sign will be written, to briefly look at the single letters and how the madda sign is used with them, although the single letters will be covered in another lesson. So what we're talking about here is at the beginning of some surahs you see these single letters. A typical one is Yasin, and we've got a whole different lesson on that. However, some of those letters have the madda sign on them, so we're going to cover it briefly within this lesson. To understand how to read the alif maqsura if it carries the madda sign. And we're going to compare the Uthmani and Majidi scripts as we go along. So the madda sign. The madda sign is a small wavy sign. On your keyboards, or in English, this would normally be known as the tilde. It indicates that an elongation of a sound is to be done, i.e. the sound is to be stretched for a certain amount of time, and we're going to learn all the rules around this. So this is the madda sign on top of an alif. So it's a bit like, or it is rather, the tilde sign that you get on your normal keyboards or in the English language. Okay, now we're going to have a look how the madda sign is used for all different purposes. So the first one here is what we call alif madda. When hamza with fatha is followed by the long vowel alif, it can be written as an alif madda. This will be pronounced as normal, 2 lengths long, just like any fatha alif long vowel. You will normally find the hamza written with the alif rather than the alif madda in the Holy Quran. So let's explain that. Here we have hamza, fatha and alif. Now another alternate way of writing those two is to write just an alif with the madda, and that is actually called the alif madda. But again, you will normally not find this in the Holy Quran. You'll find it written separately as hamza, fatha, alif. So looking at the Holy Quran, these are some examples of hamza, fatha, alif. So the first one we've got, and again this is Uthmani, is amana. So it's too long, just like a normal long vowel that we've done in the long vowel lessons. The next one is a very familiar word, and you can see it here. It's the Qur'an. Okay, and the an there is too long. And below we have the same two written in the Majidi script, and you can see here what they've done is they've written the alif with a short alif on top of it, or the dagger alif, to indicate it's too long. And the reason they normally do not write the alif madda is because the tilde sign, or the wavy madda sign, is normally used for sounds that are greater than too long. So instead of using it for sounds instead of using it for the sound which is too long, in our case the hamza fatha alif, they either write it as just pure hamza fatha alif, or they use the small dagger or short alif on top of the alif itself, so that people do not get confused with the lengths. Now, just a word of warning here. One of the words you will find the hamza fatha alif is in the word akhirah. So here we've got it, and it's written as, so this is just taken out of a line of the Holy Quran. You've got lal akhirata. Now, be very careful here, because we did learn that you can have the Hamza sitting on an alif. Now, in this particular word, the Hamza and Fatha is slightly before the actual alif in the Lam alif. Hence, this is actually Lam, Hamza, Fatha, Alif. Okay, so you've got to be a bit careful there. It's a bit of a tricky one. And in a lot of prints, the Hamza, Fatha will be slightly even more before the actual Alif. And down below we have the Majidi version. They've made it easy for us because they've simply put the alif with the short alif or dagger alif on top to indicate it's too long. So that first one in the Uthmani script, be a bit careful with that. That is not a Hamza sitting on an alif, it's Hamza before an alif. Now we're going to look at elongation of the long vowel sounds. So we learned in previous lessons about these long vowel sounds. So we've got the Fatha alif, the Kasra ya, and the Dhamma waw. Now, if they are followed by certain things, they're going to be stretched in their lengths of pronunciation. So the first one is if you have one of these long vowel sounds, which are normally too long, and it's followed by a Hamza in the same word, then it's going to be stretched. Now, the lengths for which these are stretched will vary depending which book you look at, who you learn from. So I've put the most common ones. So if you get a lot of the color-coded Tajweed Qurans, it will say 4 to 5 long, and some other books will say 4 long. Okay, so to be safe, if you go for the 4 long in length, so we're going to pronounce it 4 times long instead of 2, then you're safe. The second rule is if any of the long vowels are followed by a Hamza, and the Hamza is actually in the next word, i.e. it's the first letter of the next word, then you pronounce it either 4 to 5 long, or in some books they'll say 2 or 4 long. So again, if you stick to the 4 long, you'll be safe. And the last one is if any of these long vowels are followed by a sakin letter, and this by definition also includes any mushaddad letter, i.e. a letter carrying the shadda, because the shaddad letter again is effectively a sukoon, one of the letters with sukoon, i.e. sakin, followed by the letter with its own vowel sound, and we've covered that in the lesson on shadda or gemination. If that occurs, i.e. the long vowel is followed by a letter with sakin or mushaddad, then it's definitely going to be 6 long. Okay, so if you follow the colors in red here, it keeps it nice and simple. So if you have a long vowel followed by Hamza in the same word, pronounce the long vowel as 4 long instead of 2. If it's followed by Hamza in the next word, same thing, make it 4 long. And if it's followed by a letter with sukoon, i.e. sakin letter, or a mushaddad letter, then go for 6 long. A note here, elongation can also happen with the alif maqsura, because remember the alif maqsura is effectively the alif painted as a ya, and it will come at the end of a word after a letter with fatha, so effectively operates like the fatha alif. So the same rule can be applied to the alif maqsura, and we'll see some examples of this as well. So let's look at an example here. So here we have the word ja'a. Now normally this would be jim fatha alif, but because it's followed by a hamza, and this is in the same word, again you'd have to know grammar, because it's in the same word they put the madda sign on the alif, and this will now be elongated, and the simple rule is keep this to 4 long. So this would be ja'a. Okay, now if we look below in the Majidi version, the madda sign is slightly different, and again the madda here may indicate in that particular Quran a certain length. So with these lengths, they can vary depending on which Quran and which teacher you learn from. So for us, we're just going to say 4 long. Okay, and notice in the Majidi script, this is quite a thick madda sign, and it's not really like a tilde, slightly different. Another example, so this time we're doing it with the long vowel kasra ya. So here we have sin kasra ya. Now that's followed by a hamza, and again it's in the same word. So they've put this small madda sign on the ya to indicate it's being elongated. So instead of saying si at, you'd recite si at. So 4 and then the at, 4 long. And again in the Majidi script we've got the same thing, and they've put the madda sign in and they draw it slightly differently in the Majidi script. Now hamza in the next word. So again we're going for the safe rule of going 4 long. However, check in your Quran how they define the lengths. The first one here, then we have a manu, and then we've got this alif with the round circle. We're going to cover that in another lesson, but in the Uthmani script the round circle does not signify the sukun. It signifies that the letter is not to be read at all. So we'll just read this as amanu, and then the next word, which is awfu, starts with a hamza. So it's a hamza seated on an alif. So these are 2 separate words. So the last bit of amanu, i.e. the long vowel dhamma waw, so noon with the dhamma and the waw, which is normally too long as nu, will carry a madda and it will be elongated, and we could do that as 4 long to be safe. So that would be recited as amanu. Okay, so 2 and 4 long. And down below in the Majidi script, again they write this slightly differently. The hamza fatha alif they've written as alif with a short alif on it, so that's still a, 2 long, and then we've got ma, and then the nu, and they've put effectively here a normal madda sign that you would see in the Uthmani script. And notice that the next word is the hamza on the alif, but in the Majidi script they don't write the hamza in. And remember, we said in a previous lesson that if you ever have an alif at the beginning of a word, so awfu is a word here, then it is actually a hamza. So it's either hamzatul wasl or it's the hamzatul qat', and we've covered that before in a separate lesson. So in the Majidi script, this is a bit more difficult to recognize why the previous word carries a madda, because the rule of looking at the next word and seeing if it starts with a hamza, the hamza is not actually written there. So again, it's preferred if you can learn to read the Quran through the Uthmani script and learn all the proper rulings. Again, another example of hamza in the next word. So here we have ma luhu. So normally this is another way of writing the long vowel combination of dhamma waw, so the little waw is written there instead. So that hu is normally 2 long. However, the next word idha begins with hamza sitting under an alif, so again it will force the long vowel to go from 2 long to 4 long. Okay, so this would be ma luhu idha. And down the bottom, Majidi script again, they draw this little waw slightly different. It's effectively an upside down waw, but that's indicating hu is 2 long in the Majidi script, and then they've got the madda sign on top of it. And again, the hamza in the next word is written just as if it's an alif, but it's still a hamza. Okay, another few examples here. So here we've got bima unzila, and because the ma is too long, i.e. it's fatha alif long vowel. They put a madda on it because the next word unzila begins with hamza. So again, that would be bima unzila. Okay, so the ma is 4 long. And you can see it again at the end of that sentence as well. Down below, again, the Majidi script, the madda sign's been put in, and the hamza on the word unzila has been dropped. So it just looks like an alif, but it's actually a hamza. Same rule taking place. Bima is one word, unzila is another word. So the hamza is occurring in the next word after the long vowel. So it will go for a length of 4 if we play it safe with the 4 length rule. Now, just a small word of warning here. The alif maqsura needs to be looked at as well, because, and we covered this in previous lessons, the alif maqsura is effectively an alif written or painted as a ya sign, and it always occurs on the end of a letter after, it always occurs on the end of a word after another letter which has a fatha, so it's effectively operating as a long vowel alif. Okay, so because of that, when it's read in the middle of a sentence, it's got another word after it, it's effectively can be read as if it's the long vowel fatha alif, and hence it undergoes the rules of this madda. So here we have ila, which would normally be too long, ila, and the alif maksura, they've written the small dagger alif, or the short alif above it. Now the next word begins with hamza, so we have ahlihi. So what happens here, it's the same thing, alif maksura is acting as a long vowel, it's followed by another word which begins with hamza, hence they've put the madda on it. So again, this becomes ila, 4 long. And below, they've done the same thing, but this is the Majidi script. So they've drawn the alif maksura, and the ya there is slightly differently drawn, but they've got the short alif and the madda on top of it as well. Okay, so be aware, alif maksura undergoes the same rules if it's followed by another word. Now, with the alif maksura, you've got to be a bit careful when you're stopping on a word which ends in alif maksura. So here we have a word which is la yatgha. Now normally the gha would be too long, and you can see that with the small dagger alif, and they've put a madda on it because in the next sentence which follows, the first word begins with hamza. Now if you are carrying on, then the gha can be read as 4 long, okay, i.e. you're not stopping. However, if you stop, you must read the alif maksura as 2 long, as you would normally. Okay, so you effectively just ignore the madda sign. So that would be la yatgha gha. And down the bottom we've got exactly the same, and they've drawn it with the small dagger alif, the madda sign, and alif maksura. Again, the next word, they haven't drawn the hamzatul wasl, they haven't drawn the hamza on top of the alif. So rule there, if stopping, don't pronounce the madda, just keep the alif maksura as 2 long. And that's the rule, when you stop on a word with alif maksura, you always pronounce it as 2 long. Now we go on to the next rule, which is when you have a long vowel followed by a letter with sakin. And again, we said this includes any letter which is mushaddad, because a letter which is mushaddad consists of one letter with sakin and the letter with its own sound. And this is taken from Al-Fatiha, which you recite every day. And you'll notice in the prayer they recite waladdallin. So the dad with fatha is 6 long. Okay, so it's very long, and it must be kept at 6 long. And the reason here, we've got the dad with fatha and then followed by an alif, so normally it would be too long. But the next is lam mushaddad, so a lam which has got shadda, hence that lam itself would be broken down into one lam with sukun, sakin, and one lam with kasra. Now because the first lam is actually lam sakin, the long vowel before, in this case the alif, fatha and alif, will elongate to 6 long. So they've actually put the madda sign on the alif, so the dad, fatha, alif goes 6 long, and it's because of the lam sakin in the lam mushaddad. And down the bottom, same thing again, but they've drawn the madda sign, that's the Majidi script. So either if you have a long vowel sound followed by any letter with sukoon or any letter which is mushaddad, it will always go to 6 long. Now the single letters. Okay, so you would have seen in some surahs like Surah Yasin that you have these individual letters at the beginning of the surah, and there's only a few surahs. So these letters that you will see at the beginning of only a handful of surahs, okay, they're known as the single letters. The name of the letter is pronounced and not the sound. So we'll cover this in another lesson completely to do with these letters. However, we need to cover some of them now because they carry also a madda sign. We need to know how to recite those. Okay, so here we've got an example from a very well-known surah, which is Yasin. Now the two letters here are written at the beginning of the surah, and with these single letters they effectively are pronounced as the name of the alphabet, not the sound. So here you cannot say Yasa, it would be Ya and Sin, so that's both the letters, the name of the actual alphabet letters themselves. Now with some of those letters they're pronounced as 2 long, and some of them are pronounced as 6 long. If they're pronounced as 6 long, they will carry the madda sign. And there's the rule, or there is no real rule, you just have to know there's a certain letters are always 6 long and they will always carry the madda sign. The other ones will be 2 long, and sometimes they don't carry any sign at all, and sometimes they'll carry the dagger alif. So the first example here of Yasin is the ya with no sign on it at all, i.e. no vowel sound, so we know it will be 2 long. And the second one is the sin with madda, so that's going to be 6 long. So when you hear it recited, they'll go Yasin. Okay, the second example there is the Majidi script, so they've put the dagger alif in there because again in Majidi they try to help you along a bit, that's indicating 2 long, and they've got the madda on the sin, so that's still 6 long. Okay, now these single letters are actually called the muqatta'at. Okay, so they're separate letters, or the single letters, and we'll cover that in a separate session. Just for our knowledge though, these letters that you can see are the ones which will be written on their own. They're pronounced as the alphabet names, and these ones out of all of those single letters will carry the madda sign, so these ones are always recited as 6 long. Okay, and again they'll always be in the first part of the surah, as in the first sentence. Although they're separate letters, they don't actually make up any specific words, and they're just recited according to the length. So these ones, so there's about 8 of them there, 8 letters, which all will carry the madda sign, both in the Uthmani and the Majidi script, and you just recite them as 6 long. But you recite the name of the letter, not the sound. So here you'd say qaf, not qa. Okay, so it'd be 6 lengths. Qaf. So in conclusion, we understand what the madda sign is. We know how to apply the madda sign to the long vowel sounds. We know that some of the single letters will carry the madda sign and how they are read, although we'll expand on that in a letter specifically on the single letters. We understand how to read the alif maqsura if it carries a madda sign, and we did it in the middle of a sentence and at the end of a sentence. So that is the end of that lesson.